We all love tech, but it doesn't always love us back. And there's a whole bunch of times where companies have spent absolute fortunes and promised us the world with their new products, but either they never materialized, they didn't live up to the hype and the expectations, and we've all, including myself, just ended up kind of wasting our money. So I'm Tom the Tech Chap, and this is my take on the 10 most supposedly future-proofed best tech that kind of wasn't. Number 1, and this is kind of a biggie and also ongoing because, well, let me introduce you to my lasagna chef on wheels made here by Apple's Image Playground. Apple Intelligence. It's easy to get swept up in little rivalries between Android and iOS and Windows and Mac and all those things, but I think we can mostly agree that Apple products are very good. However, when you market an entire generation of devices, pretty much everything from 2025 was sold as ready for Apple Intelligence. This is why you want a new Mac Studio or a new iPad or a MacBook or iPhone. And yes, there are some useful tools like the writing tools, some of the notification priorities, but quite frankly, with Apple Intelligence, they overpromised and they underdelivered. Genmojis, this image playground, the cleanup tool in the Photos app, which is still by far the worst on any phone. And in fact, its core AI is so far behind the rivals that they've basically, at least for now, ditched their in-house attempts and are going over to Google, and they'll be integrating Gemini into Siri, which actually I think, credit to them, is the right move. I'm very excited to see a superpowered Siri with Gemini. But taken as a group of features and considering how they massively sold and marketed Apple Intelligence as a big reason to spend your money and upgrade, for me it's one of the most frustrating kind of letdowns that we've seen in recent tech history. And speaking of overpromising, say hello to my little friend here. This is the Rabbit R1, and actually I don't mind this thing. It was only 150 quid. It's a bit of a sort of novelty gadget. There was no subscription required, and this was designed to be your sort of pocket companion. You could answer questions, you could take photos, and you'd have sort of a natural language conversation with an AI on a cute little device that was made by Teenage Engineering. Lovely, and actually I love the team behind Rabbit, but fundamentally, you could do most of those things on your phone. And if you can get away without carrying another sort of techie, gadgety piece of plastic in your pocket, then that's probably a good thing. Tell me about the Tech Chap.
Are you looking for research, a summary, or something else?
Summary.
Are you specifically interested in a person, a channel, or something else that did? How detailed would you like this summary to be? Brief and concise, or more comprehensive?
Concise.
What output format would
Oh my god. Just tell me the answer.
I'm here to clarify your request.
It just doesn't listen. I think Rabbit launched this at a really tough time in this sort of intersection of on-device AI and as the apps like ChatGPT and Gemini were coming out on our phones. Lovely idea. Either came out too late or too soon, and it all just kind of fizzled out, despite their best attempts with some pretty serious software upgrades. What was not, in my opinion, a good product at all was the Humane AI Pin. This wearable AI assistant that could take photos and project this tiny screen on your hand, and you'd sort of press your palm together and press your fingers to interact with it. Perfect for a viral TikTok video, not so practical in real life, especially when it would cost $700 and a subscription.
So unfortunately, this thing is bad at almost everything it does, basically all the time.
I usually love this kind of innovation, but it was so overhyped, it was so expensive, and honestly, it just did not work well. I tried it at a couple of CESs and events I went to, but it just wasn't practical. It was buggy, it was unreliable, with a pretty ropey projector, terrible battery life, and it just didn't sell. But is history doomed to repeat itself? Because a company that the former Apple designer Johnny Ive and Sam Altman have teamed up for is apparently developing an AI device, whether it's a pen or a wearable or a pendant of sorts. And also Apple's rumored to have some sort of wearable AI device as well, perhaps coming down the road. But at the end of the day, are we just all going to pull out our phones and use this instead? Are these newfangled AI devices, wearables, all doomed to fail? What do you think? Number 3, and it kind of pains me to include this, but I think we do need to include VR, and also things like, MR, XR, all those something R's. Can you believe it's been 10 years since the HTC Vive came out? I remember one of my first assignments when I was working at Trusted Reviews was to review the Vive and also come up with like the 10 best games for it. And I think a lot of those games are still some of the best games you can get for VR headsets. Each time we have a new device, the hype is there, everyone's like, this one's going to be different. And initially you're like, whoa, this is amazing, this is magical. But without fail, after a couple of weeks, it takes pride of place on my shelf and then starts gathering dust. I love VR, don't get me wrong. I think there are some incredible experiences. If you've ever played Gran Turismo 7 in a PSVR 2, if you've ever taken to the skies in Flight Sim with a MetaQuest 3 or one of the headsets that allows you to use it with the PC, if you've ever used a Apple Vision Pro and done anything in this, because the entire experience is genuinely magical. They're all incredible and much better experiences than we had a few years ago, but it's still a really small market that's barely growing. Meta have even shut down some of their studios that were developing apps and games for the Quest, and for now at least, there's still no getting around the fact that you're wearing a big, chunky goggle on your head that's going to make you sweat after half an hour, that's going to be uncomfortable, that's kind of isolating because you're in your own world here. Some experiences can also make you motion sick. And while I wouldn't say AR and VR is dead by any stretch, I'm actually really excited to see what Valve does with their new headset coming out this year in a few months. We're still not living our true Star Trek holodeck or Ready Player One lives, at least not yet.
The sense of reality was absolutely incredible.
What has failed spectacularly though, and maybe the biggest waste of $70 billion, the metaverse. Meant to be Meta's VR/AR world for working and meetings and hanging out with your friends, like a next generation Second Life, Meta burned so much money on its Reality Labs, and also obviously changed the name from Facebook to Meta, and years later, there is basically nothing to show for it, or at least nothing that you and I would ever want to get involved with. And now they're scaling it back in a major way. Most people, in their everyday lives, don't want to wear bulky headsets and live in a VR world. Actually, a lot of us would probably like to escape this real world right now, but the metaverse was just not somewhere any of us wanted to go. So I'm glad Meta are pivoting away from the metaverse, and I'm sure a lot of the R&D and experiences from that transferred over to the Quest. And of course, Meta Ray-Bans and the wearables, smart glasses side of things now is very exciting. I love my Meta Ray-Bans. So I'm excited to see what they do next. But moving on, and I've been wearing this the whole video so far, this is a Mont Blanc smartwatch. And while it's a relatively niche product category, I think the world of luxury high-end smartwatches just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I do not understand it. Personally, I wouldn't spend 5, 10, 20, 50 grand on a watch, but some people do, and that's absolutely fine. And in a lot of cases, it'll either go up in value or you can resell it and not lose much value. And of course, you can pass it on to your kids and make it like a sentimental piece. You can probably use it forever as long as it's maintained and repaired and things. Smartwatches have the shelf life of about 5 minutes. You're not going to want to give this to your kids in 30 years. No one's going to want to buy a used one. I mean, in theory, you take a really good smart watch with, the fitness tracking and the notifications and the app ecosystem. You combine that with really exquisite, beautiful craftsmanship and a brand that means something to you. Great. But often these custom OSs just don't get much software support beyond like a year or two, if that. They have limited app support, and they really just don't have any intrinsic value. Stupid idea from the start. What wasn't a stupid idea from the start was the Xbox. This is the Series S. I also have the Series X here. I've also got an Xbox-style fridge over there for some reason. I am not a PlayStation fanboy. In fact, I have pretty much all the consoles. I will play whatever plays the games I want to play best. Doesn't matter what platform or what brand it is. When this Series X launched alongside the PS5, on paper, this was technically more powerful. I think it had slightly higher teraflops. And obviously, Xbox has a long, incredible history of exclusive games. But at launch, we had fewer exclusives, and then that just got worse and worse over time. As sad as it is, they've basically lost all their exclusivity, and I don't know why anyone would buy an Xbox right now. So if you bought one of these, I'm sure you've had a great time, but I'm also sure you'll agree with me that there's not a lot of reasons to turn this on now if you also have a PS5. But that's not the only problem I had. The Series S, which at launch was incredible value for money. You could get like a console 3/4 the way to a next generation console for like $299 or whatever it was. Really good value. But this also held back an entire generation of games. Even GTA 6 is probably gonna have to be optimized for the Series S, which means in a lot of cases, developers have to lower the graphical image quality standard of the game to make sure it runs on this. And so for that reason, the Series S has let us down because it's pulled down this entire generation of games to some extent, and the Series X has let us down because you could have spent 425 quid or so when it came out, and over time, it's just become less and less useful as they've lost their exclusivity. The hardware is still great, and I think Game Pass, while it has got more expensive over time, is still really good. But right now, going forward, I don't really know what Xbox is going to do to convince me to buy a new piece of hardware. Moving on, and this won't be controversial at all, Tesla. And where do I start with this? I mean, okay, They got rid of they gave us that yoke steering wheel. They got rid of the indicator stalks on the cars and then, made a U-turn literally and figuratively, and put those back in. They've cancelled the Model S and the Model X in order to give their factories more room for their Optimus robots.
There is a robot in this formation that does not belong. Which one?
How much did you say these things cost?
And of course, everything Elon has done recently hasn't exactly helped the brand. But more egregiously than all of that, FSD, full self-driving, i.e. hands off the wheel, eyes distracted using a phone, proper autonomous driving. That's not what we've got. FSD in the US is actually really, really good, better than anything else on the market, but it's still limited to level 2 supervised driver assist. And if you'd paid the 8-odd grand here in the UK and in other parts of the world where you're basically unlocking FSD, it's never materialized and there's no signs of it to come. And if you bought an older Tesla with, hardware 2 or hardware 3 even, you're limited by the hardware of your car on what kind of FSD experience you may one day probably not be able to have. Politics and everything else aside, I think Teslas are still incredible EVs. I really enjoy driving one. I do. I think the software experience, I think the charging infrastructure, I think the updates you get over time, they're like the iPhones of EVs, right? They just work. But what I don't like, and I think has aged terribly, hence why I'm talking about it in this video, is this idea of full self-driving and the value of it. They literally could take our money. I could pay 8 grand right now through my phone to get full self-driving, and in the UK it gives me smart summon and lane change assist with the indicator. But I just think the whole thing has been missold, overpromised, and I think a lot of people should get their money back, if I'm honest. And breathe, everything's gonna be okay. All right, number 8, and appropriately named number 8 because 8K TVs, right? Now, I like 8K TVs, and if you stand close enough with some 8K content, it's unbelievably sharp, almost like a printed-on image. And 4K upscaled to 8K, it looks sharper than any 4K TV would. But there's also some pretty big problems, like there's almost no choice. There's a couple of Samsung models to choose from. They're also very, very expensive. They also genuinely miss out on some of the new features that you get on 4K TVs, like higher brightnesses, newer panels, better gaming features like high refresh rates, better processing. You're basically getting a worse TV in every other sense, but just a higher pixel density and therefore higher detail, and also paying a lot more money for it. It just doesn't make sense. Every CES in Vegas I went to, for years, it was like, well, you've got 4K now, but look at this 8K. And every brand had big 8K TVs, and this is the future. But the question always fundamentally was, what am I watching in 8K? The answer was always, well, nothing really, but you can upscale from 4K. And yes, that does make sense, and AI upscaling has got a lot better, but it never just lined up with the economies of scale, and enough TVs were being produced to bring the price down enough so more people would buy 8K TVs. It all fizzled out, basically. So while it's not a bad technology, 8K is basically just stagnated, while 4K, OLEDs, micro RGBs, mini LEDs have all just got better. So there's really no point buying one. Although, worse than that, and moving on to number 9, 3D and curved TVs. I must admit, I do enjoy watching 3D movies and even playing a couple of 3D games. The added depth just made everything feel more immersive and cinematic. But you were compromising image quality, particularly brightness and contrast. The glasses, which were horrible plasticky things, could break and they were never particularly comfortable to wear, especially for like a 2 or 3 hour long movie. And a lot of people would just get headaches and feel nauseous. And also there just wasn't much 3D content to watch. There's only so many times you can put Avatar on to convince yourself that you made the right choice buying a 3D TV. In the end, 4K and HDR TVs offered much better image quality, and people just don't want to put on a pair of glasses to watch a movie. 3D TVs were not worth it, but there is no excuse for curved TVs. All the manufacturers were saying, well, you're going to get a more immersive experience and it's going to look cool. It did look kind of cool, actually. But unless you're watching it in the perfect sweet spot and just by yourself, you're going to get worse reflections, you're paying more money for it. It was not a social experience, which traditionally TVs are supposed to be about in your living room. I get it for curved monitors because they're designed for one person sitting in the sweet spot. But that whole mid-2010s era of curved 3D TVs, what a waste of time and money. And have you ever seen a curved TV wall mounted? That is just ridiculous.
The curve? How do you think it's going to impact how viewers experience your movies?
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Last but not least, actually maybe least, this one I was going back and forth on a little bit as a sort of tech fail or something that didn't live up to the hype. But you've got phones like the Samsung Galaxy Edge and also the Air, neither of which have sold particularly well. Because it turns out, as beautiful as these phones are, people aren't willing to compromise on battery life, camera quality, cooling, and basically everything in order just to have a thinner phone. I'm not convinced we're going to see another Galaxy Edge, which is a shame, although I do kind of hope we get an updated Air 2 at some point. There's rumors around, ultra-wide camera. If you've ever held or used an Air, I'm sure you'll agree it is a stunning phone. Is it worth getting over an iPhone 17 or a Pro? Probably not, because the real benefit is just it's a bit thinner and lighter, but it is very nice. I appreciate them trying to make something a bit different, but I think the sales figures speak for themselves. People like the idea of these phones and maybe playing with them in the shop, but at the end of the day, they're going to go up to the counter and buy an iPhone 17, which they probably should do, because for me, this was the best phone of 2025. Having said all that, to all those engineers, product designers, blue sky thinkers, anyone making and building these products, hats off to you. I couldn't do that. I'm just some idiot on a YouTube video saying how you failed. But I want you to keep doing it. This is what makes my job so enjoyable. Keep experimenting, keep trying things, keep failing, because eventually you're going to stumble upon something truly innovative that, also importantly, people want. But what about you? What do you think has been the biggest tech fail, or like the most hyped product that then just didn't materialize or they overpromised? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time right here on Tech Chat.